Hello, welcome to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. We're going to be talking about milk machines today. All different types, not just the big types like this. I have milked my goats with several different types of machines, automatic, manual. I've even used a human breast pump on a goat before, which works pretty well for most goats. But right now I'm using this Caprolite Herdsman, and I bought this with my own money. No one paid me to talk about this in a positive light. I've got several different machines and things that I've used that I don't actually like, and I'll be talking to you about those things and the reasons why I don't like them. But I know that a lot of you will be clicking on this video because you're considering machine milking. You're not machine milking yet. And I've got a little pieces of advice for you. Some of it's a little bit hard to hear, and I think we'll just lead out with that so that you can start mulling these things over in your mind about what's important when it comes to a dairy animal on your homestead. Some goats are just hard to milk. A lot of people think that hand milking is hard, and it can be. There is a learning curve. I'm not going to say that there's not. But some goats, just in and of themselves and the way that they are structured, are just hard to milk. Not every goat is going to be an amazing milker, and not every goat is going to create that nice experience that everyone hopes for when they think about having a dairy animal. One of the more important things when it comes to milking a goat, no matter whether you're milking with a machine or by hand, is the orifice size. So the orifice is the opening in the teat that the milk comes out of. If your goat has a really tiny orifice and the milk coming out is only coming out like the thickness of a thread or like a piece of cotton twine, something like that, really thin stream, it can take a very long time to empty that kind of udder. And a lot of times goats don't have a ton of patience on the stand. There are some angels out there that will stand no matter what. Those are great goats, but still, if you're trying to hand milk or milk by machine, a really slow flow like that, it's not going to be enjoyable. You're going to get tons of hand cramps and things. The ideal orifice for me will put out a stream of milk about the thickness of like a piece of worsted weight yarn. If you crafters out there know what I'm talking about. An udder that empties easily is going to be a lot more enjoyable to milk. Now, I actually prefer hand milking. I only got this machine because I was noticing issues with one of my elbows. If I would milk out more than about a gallon to a gallon and a half every day, then I would get some pretty major issues going on with my elbow, to the extreme that I couldn't even really grip the steering wheel to drive, like pretty intense. And instead of considering things like surgery or whatever, I would just consider that maybe I'm overworking this part of my body for no good reason. So that's when I got this machine, and I genuinely really do love this machine. I don't find that it's faster than hand milking, all things considered, because the goats that I'm milking right now, they're easy to milk by hand or by machine. They put out a lot of milk and they release their milk very easily no matter what is on them. And it takes a little bit longer to clean a machine than it does just to clean a milk pail. And there's a little bit more steps and things involved in cleaning a machine, and we'll go over that as well. It is one of my best pieces of advice, besides just having or getting a goat, intentionally buying goats that are easier to milk, is persevering and trying to hand milk, because really when the power goes out, there's any number of reasons that a machine could malfunction and go down, and you got to do something to empty the udder. So have some kind of backup, and I think the best thing is really to be able to back up, to revert, and to be able to use your hands. It is really great to have a machine as backup to your hands while you're learning, because there is a learning curve to learning how to hand milk. I have some videos on learning hand milking, and I'll put that in the description box below. But for cases where hand milking isn't possible or just isn't going to work for whatever reason, machine milking is very valuable. So when I first started with goats, I bought my first goats from Living Traditions Homestead. A lot of you, I'm sure, have seen their videos. I don't know if a lot of you maybe have seen their goat videos, but when Sarah would milk Rory or her other goats, I had purchased Rory from her. She had used what was called a brake bleeder type system. So it was this jar with some tubes and this device called a brake bleeder that has some kind of other purpose but can work to create suction in a hand milk machine type setting. So because Rory had already been hand milked or machine milked that way, I went ahead and made one of those, and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. What it does is it creates like a constant suction on the teat. And so, you know, if the goat is full enough and you create the vacuum, of course, some milk is going to flow out. But really, that's not healthy for the goat's teat at all, to have a constant suction on them. Even if you're keeping the suction relatively low, number one, you're not going to get a lot of milk out. You shouldn't really increase the suction beyond about 11-ish PSI. But in order to empty the udder, I felt like I had to. I went up to about 15 PSI, massaging udders and things. It just seemed like way more work than hand milking was. And so I quickly learned to hand milk. But also I wasn't really adept at hand milking. It is hard to learn exactly what motions to use. A lot of goats don't milk out the same by hand, so you kind of learn different techniques with the different udders. But while I was learning how to hand milk, I ditched the brake bleeder pump. I actually used a used human breast pump. Now that might gross some people out. I don't know why, because you can sterilize those components and absolutely reuse them. If you felt like it, you could buy some new tubes, whatever. But that was a very viable option. It worked really well. Human breast pumps come with a pulsator. There's a suction that is engaged and then releases, and then it engages and then releases. And that's a very, very important for udder health. You don't want to create a lot of inflammation in the teat. Not only is that going to be uncomfortable for your doe, but you can cause irreparable damage to the udders of your does with a constant suction. And what's funny but not funny is that when Rory came to me, one of the halves of her udder didn't even work. I couldn't get milk out of it ever at all. And I don't know that her being milked with a machine like that wasn't part of the issue that she had. One of the drawbacks with a human breast pump being used as a pump for goats is if their teats get too long, like the teats that are comfortable to hand milk, they don't really work in a human breast pump. The nipples on women are not designed the same way as teats on goats. So you can get away with it for most like Nigerian dwarf teats that are pretty small. But when you get to the larger type goats, the shield that comes with the human breast pump doesn't work very well for a larger breed goat, and the volume that the little baby bottles can hold doesn't really work either. You kind of have to stop what you're doing and empty the baby bottle, and it does work. It's just a little bit fussy having to empty out the bottle and dump, and goats don't have a lot of patience on the milk stand, so you want to be able to put on the machine or get your hands on the udder and milk out what you need to and be done relatively quickly. I used varying human breast pumps for a couple of years. I did go through quite a few of them because I kept buying cheaper versions of the breast pump that were battery powered, and they did work well. They allowed me to learn how to hand milk while also being able to be reassured that my does were being emptied, because that's one of the most important things when it comes to milking your goats. You want to make sure that they are not staying super full for super long, because if they're that full, a lot of the times, number one, they'll just start drying up their milk supply. But if they start to leak, a leaking udder is a way for bacteria to get it, and then you can get mastitis and a whole bunch of other issues. So it is very important while you're learning how to hand milk that you have some kind of way to get the milk out regardless. So I got pretty good at hand milking, and I really like hand milking, and I milked and milked and milked. We actually milk year round because I have a spring kidding season and a fall kidding season. So I'm always milking something every single day. And that can be a lot on your hands. Having a break is good, and this allows me to have that break. So eventually I got tired of continuing to buy these $40 to $50 human breast pumps when they just quit working. And so I went a long time without using the pump. I had figured out how to hand milk very well, but when I had purchased some bigger goats that had a lot of volume, I was noticing that when I was milking about 1 gallon to 1.5 gallons every single day, that's about the maximum that I could handle before my elbow started acting up. So realizing that I really needed to do something, I started shopping around for milk machines. When you Google, even like American-made milk machine, stuff like this does not come up. People can pay for their product to be, you know, up at the top of the search engine, and I had to really ask around to find this company. This is Caprolite. I bought the Herdsman, and it was important to me to find something American made. This is a veteran-owned company. that had really great customer service just in case I needed anything. These guys have been so great to deal with. I haven't had to call them a whole bunch of times, not for anything serious, but I couldn't figure out how to put the handle on this larger can that I have. This is a 4-gallon can, and they helped me out with that. And then when I had some questions about the energy draw on the pump itself, they were able to help me out very quickly with that. Now, this is an oilless pump. There's no oil involved. You can find some milk machines that do need oiling. It is my recommendation that you don't even worry about that. There are plenty of oilless pumps out there that don't need that kind of a maintenance. I don't have any experience with something like the hand top milker. That thing wasn't around when I was looking for milk machines. I may have purchased that and tried it out in between the human breast pump and this thing had I seen it, but it just wasn't there. I know quite a few of you probably have it. If you want to share your experiences down below, I'm sure people would really love to be able to scroll the comments and read your reviews on something like that. So go ahead and leave that down there. One of the things that I do really like about that is I can see on Amazon that that machine does pulsate. This here is called an inflation, and we'll get more into this in just a little bit. But this has a silicone insert inside, and it's got this clear plastic case. We'll see this when we go down and milk the goats in just a minute. But with that hand top milker that you can buy on Amazon, you can see while it's being used that the silicone sucks in on the teat and then releases. Sucks in on the teat and then releases. And that's that very important pulsation that I was talking about before. That machine does do that. I think the capacity for the cup that it comes with is pretty small, but that might not matter. Just like with the human breast pump in the bottle, you can just dump that out into a larger can and keep going. And I think that like budget option is quite viable just by appearances. Again, I haven't had the chance to use it. One of the things that I did get a chance to use, and I tried this in the interim while I was in my shopping phases for something like this, is I did use this Utterly Easy Milker. And I saw this on Sandy Brock's channel. She has a lot of sheep in Canada, and when she needs to express colostrum out of a ewe, she uses one of these. She really likes it. I actually really don't. And it's the same reason that I don't like the brake bleeder pump. It goes on the doe, her teat goes in there. It comes with different sized inflations. This is for the Nigerian dwarf, and you prime it and create this constant suction, which the goats do not seem to enjoy, and it long term isn't healthy for their teats. I still have this because God forbid if anything happened to me and some of the goats needed relief, this would be the easiest thing for my husband to use until something else could be figured out for my goats. But this is not something that I would recommend you buy for daily use. That same company also has a milk machine. I believe you can buy it on Premier One. The thing is unfortunately that milk machine also doesn't come with a pulsator, so it doesn't do the pulsating action. I have spoken with the manufacturer of that machine, and he said that, you know, there's a vet that looked at the machine, and the vet confirmed that the machine will pulsate with the doe's heartbeat. And I looked into this for goodness, probably a week, and I could not find any videos that showed pulsation and any confirmation that the machine itself actually releases suction on the teat. Now, what you can notice when you're using something like this is that when the milk is streaming into the bottle, there will be a difference in the pressure from the inside of the doe's udder based on her heartbeat because she has blood pressure. The suction on the outside of the teat is what's important. So even if you're using something like this or the brake bleeder pump and you're noticing, you know, a difference in the flow as the doe's heart beats, that means that she has a blood pressure, which is good, she's alive, but it doesn't mean that this device itself releases the pressure on the teat, and that is what's important. So that there is another machine that I would not buy for my goats. I know that there are people that use it and like it, and that is fine for them. It's not fine for me. Actually, down here, this is the pulsator on this machine, and these can be adapted. Like, there are people that make these. This was expensive. I don't have the ingenuity to put something like this together. But from what I hear, I think it was Johnson Branch Farm made a milk machine. If I can find the link to their video, I will put it below. They made the milk machine for about $500 or $600. And I'd like to do that one day just so I can have a backup in case something happens to this one. At the moment, my backup are my hands, but I can't do that for very long or I'm gonna have problems. But from what I remember, the pulsator really wasn't that expensive. So I feel like in order to increase the safety of our goats, putting something like this on existing machines out there that don't have them, that's a good choice. Okay, so let's get a better look at my milk machine. It is kind of dirty. I have used this. This is my 3rd season now, and I do enjoy it. I did upgrade to the 4-gallon bucket because I knew that the volume coming out of my goats was going to require that. Right now we're getting 3.5 gallons a day, and when I do tip this back to roll it around, we're going to roll it down to the barn in just a minute, it does kind of touch the lid. Now this lid is secured down. It doesn't leak out or anything, but when the milk kind of falls into the reservoir down here, it can tend to foam up. So if you're getting about 1 gallon a day from your goats, don't just get the gallon size pail. Size up a little bit to account for like an ice pack that you might want to put in there, or the foaming that inevitably happens when the milk falls down into the pail. Now there is a go around to this. We've talked about it a little bit. You could always open up the pail and empty it into a bigger pail. Totally viable option. But if you can upgrade just to have it all going down into the single pail, to me it like streamlines things, which if you can streamline a few things in the process, it really does help make it go easier. So what I'm milking down in my barn right now are Nigerian dwarfs, La Manchas, and mini La Manchas. These here are Nigerian dwarf inflations, and they work for all sizes of teats in my barn. And I've got some really nice 4-finger teats. It's what they call them when you can put your whole hand around the teat. Those are 4-finger teats. And the Nigerian inflations do great with all sizes of teats in my barn. My mentor actually has a couple goats with teats that are even larger than the teats that I have on my goats, and she uses the Nigerian inflations, and so I don't have to switch the inflations out when I have a different goat on the stand, which is really nice. Another thing that's really nice is these valves here that turn the suction on and off. In some systems, you have to like kink the hose. It's not a big deal if that's what you're used to, but turning this key is pretty simple, and so I like that feature of it. One of the reasons that I like this machine instead of some others is it came with this really nice cart. It's got wheels on the side. I did change out the handle a little bit. It just had this piece here. It had a little comfort grip thing on it, but I had my husband put this pull handle on it because that is just a little bit easier for me. So yeah, let's stop gabbing and get to milking. And I'll answer more questions when we're down there. So I store my milking machine in my shed, and I have to take the milk machine from my shed down to the barn, and sometimes I have to do it when it's raining. I try to just watch the weather and look at the radar and go down there when it's not raining and hopefully come back when it's not raining. But sometimes we don't get that option, and I don't really want to take this through a downpour. So what I do when that's happening, it's pretty simple. I just put a bag over it. This here is just a regular old grocery bag. Sometimes I'll cover the pulsator too, but I'm more worried about this like motor. And that's all I do to take it through the rain. Are you ready, my dear? Look at her, she was born ready. Holy moly. This here is my milking area. As you can see, we have 2 stands. It's not really necessary that you have 2 stands like this if you're milking a bunch of goats. You can definitely go one by one. There are attachments to be able to milk 2 goats at once, and I do have those attachments, but one of the things that I realized with my system is that I need to be able to allow one goat to finish eating before I can bring up another goat. And so it works out that I can milk one doe and give her grain, stop milking her, let her finish eating while I'm milking another doe. By the time this doe is done milking, this doe is done eating, and I can pull her off, bring another one up, start milking that doe while this doe finishes eating. If I was milking 2 at once, I would still have quite a pause in between bringing does up while I let them finish their breakfast. They need this grain in order to produce the kind of volume that they're producing, and so this kind of back and forth system works really well for me, although there are options to milk 2 at once. Christine! I do milk my goats in the same order every day. It helps things go the most smoothly. Come here, girl. Got a plug over here. I'm just going to plug this in. Just takes a regular plug like so, and this machine here has a little button on the side that turns it on. Sounds like that. Now, there are very different ways that people will prep their does before milking. I'm not here to really tell anybody to change up their system or to tell anybody that the way I do things is the most ideal way, but a lot of times I will just wipe off the udders and that's it. A lot of people will strip out the first little bits of milk. You can do that because in theory that is where the most bacteria could reside. I have kind of stopped doing that, but it's not a bad practice. So now she's ready. Christine does not have a big udder. She hasn't kidded since last year. She's never made a whole ton of milk. Currently she's nursing her granddaughter, so she looks a little bit uneven. This is the granddaughter's fault. I'm milking her because when she's done milking, she's officially retired and I won't milk her again. So it's just an emotional thing for me. Here I have my inflations. They are closed off. So when I turn the machine on, there's going to be suction in the lines, but this section isn't making it out this far. Okay, so what I'm going to do is put this teacup on her and open this valve that's going to create suction here. You can see it starting. And do the same thing on the other side. Like that. Now you can probably notice we're not getting much anything out of that side. That's because her granddaughter's been nursing that side. It is not a problem for the machine to be working on that side even though nothing is coming out. That pulsation with nothing coming out is not going to hurt her. So because Christine doesn't make a lot of milk, I do kind of help the machine along a little bit by massaging essentially from the beginning. Massaging the udder just helps release some of the milk that might be held up tight to the body. Release it down low. It's called a let down. And I know that I need to massage the udder a little bit when I see that there's less milk flowing in through the tubes. So I've shut off the machine. She's done milking. I know that because the flow of milk has stopped going through the lines. There are unique situations where it's a little bit hard to tell what's going on. Like I said, every goat is different, but for Christine, it's quite easy to tell when she's done. So I've stopped the flow of suction and I'm just going to release her teats like this. Close it off. You can close these first and then release the teats and then turn off the machine. It doesn't really matter. A lot of times, especially in summertime, when I get this little bit of milk left in the machine and the tube itself, I like for that milk to be able to get down into the can where my ice pack is. So I will keep the machine on and kind of purge it like that. So I've opened up the flow, so now it's sucking in air, and that brings the milk down through the tube and into our canister. I had a question whether or not sucking in the dusty air from the barn by doing that purge would be a problem. No, it's okay. We're not like living in a cloud of dust here, and I do filter the milk out, and so it's not a problem to purge the machine like that. If you wanted to, you could do it just at the end, and I probably could get away with that, just milking the goats back and forth and then just purging at the end. So if that makes you more comfortable to not suck in air, if your area might be a little bit more dusty than mine, then go ahead and do that. Now, no milk machine that I have ever used has been able to completely empty a doe. And if you don't completely empty the doe, all you're doing is sacrificing milk volume, because you'll trigger her body into thinking that they have to make less for next time. So usually you can feel a little bit of extra milk in the udder. Some goats just have kind of a meaty feeling udder, and they can be a little bit hard to tell if it's milk or not. I know Christine very well, so I can tell that she has a little bit of milk in here, and I'm just going to hand express into this pint jar just to make sure we get out everything we can, keep her small production up. goat here is Margie, and you notice we milked Christine from behind. The goats that are on this side I tend to milk from the front. It's just the way that the tubes coil. It doesn't really matter if you milk from the front or the back as long as the milk gets out of the udder. There we go. So I did the same thing here. You can see the pulsation is alternating. Some machines will pulse both teats at the same time. That's fine too. And the milk is flowing down through the tube and then entering the canister. Sometimes I'll put the hoses around my shoulder like that just for comfort's sake. Margie's flow of milk has slowed down some. And because I know Margie, I know that she's got a little bit more milk in there. And I'll show you one of the ways, even though there's milk in the line, it is back purging a little bit, which isn't a problem, but it can fool you into thinking that you're still getting milk out when maybe you may not be. It's just kind of back flowing. So when I look back here at the hose, I'm no longer seeing milk falling into the canister. Not really, not at the flow that it really should be. It's just kind of bouncing around. So even though there's milk in the line, it's not really going anywhere because there's not more milk entering the line in order to like push it out. So I'm just gonna massage her udder, and I do a little bit of a squeeze, both sides at the same time. And on my goats, I can feel that my squeezing is encouraging more milk to come out, and I can look behind me and see that more milk is now entering the canister. So what we're doing is working. Now once I can feel that she's decently empty, again, just from experience in milking with Margie, and I'm not really seeing much milk fall into the canister again, that means she's probably done with the machine part of it, and then I can strip her out by hand. So we can shut off the machine at this point like I did with Christine, or I can just close the valve, remove her teats, and then I like to open the valve just to purge the milk. Margie is still getting used to being milked from this side. She's so used to being milked from the other side for many, many years. And so she's picky at this point. Ma'am? They're such creatures of habit. It's even hard for me to hand milk from this side. I'm just not used to it either, so I don't really blame her. Now that we're done milking Margie, Christine is done eating, and I can cycle another goat out on that side while she finishes eating. Because of my setup, I do have to unplug the machine so the goats don't trip over it. It's okay. Nope. Good girl. This little goat here, her name is Stormy. She is a Nigerian dwarf on her first freshen. She actually kidded in fall time, so she doesn't have a full udder right now. Her teats, they're not impossible to hand milk. Actually, I quite like milking her. Oh, this is hard to see. They're definitely not the smallest as far as Nigerian dwarves go. See that? I don't have any of my super tiny teated Nigerian dwarves anymore, although I have milked them with this machine and it does work on them. Well, what's going to be really interesting to see is the difference between little Stormy here, who has the smallest teats of the goats that I'm currently milking, and then Elsa, who has the largest teats of the goats that I have at all. Now, something that I did mention a little bit in the beginning was the PSI for the pressure that is being put through the lines in order to draw the milk out of the teats. This machine does have a pressure gauge. It is right here, and we can see that we're at about 11.5 PSI. Hopefully that comes up well on camera. And this particular machine also does have an adjustment, this little dial down here. It is hard to see, but know that it exists. That is what can adjust the pressure, and you can verify with the gauge down here. So that's really nice. There have been times when I felt like the pressure was really low and I couldn't figure out what the problem was. Well, I had apparently just bumped that little gauge, and so it just took a little bit of tweaking while the pressure was on. I looked at the gauge until it came up to the PSI that I like, and that is healthy for the goats, and everything was fine. So now Stormy's gonna finish eating, and we'll put another goat up here because Margie is done. Now Breezy has one of those beautiful udders that is big, not because it's full of nothing, it's because it's full of milk. So she's one that's really obvious to tell when there is no more milk in her udder. And so I'm gonna put you on a time lapse so you can just see it happen. So I'm not sure if you saw it happen on camera, but it's very common when your goat has a very soft udder all around, that when they get real deflated, the teat will move further down into the cup and kind of suck up a little bit of the bottom part of the udder. That is totally fine. This is not going to hurt them. They just have a really soft udder. It's a good thing. So I'm just going to give her a little bit of massage since she did slow down. There is some in here. Most of the time when they're holding milk back, it's up towards the top of the body. You can kind of feel it resting up towards the body. So I'll just massage at the top, and it encourages the milk to come down. A lot of times when I massage with the milker on, I can physically feel the milk softening and lowering down into the udder. There you go. If you're noticing a difference in image quality or sound, it's because I had to go get my backup camera. My other one overheated, but see, she just milks down to nothing, and I love that. Just to be sure, strip out the last little bits of milk, and then we'll get our biggest teats up on the stand. Come on, baby. Come on. Nope. Here we have Elsa, biggest teats in all the land, and I don't have to switch out the inflations, which is really, really nice. She also has a very soft udder, and she does still have one of her kids on her, but she still gives the most amount of milk. Maybe. The goat that we're gonna milk next, she has a lot of milk too. You can see that there's so much milk flow that it just fills the cup completely and surrounds the teat. Again, we can know that milk is coming out if we see it entering the pail. So we're doing good as long as we see that. And a lot like Breezy, as Elsa empties, it sucks a little bit of the bottom of her udder into the teat cup. It's not a problem. You see how close she is to the bottom of the cup? She still milks out real great. Now she's a goer. I can tell that she's slowed down in milking just from this end of the machine. I can tell that there's a lot less milk in the hoses themselves. So I can come up here and just massage and increase the flow. Again, up here towards the top of the udder. It's where they like to hold a lot of milk. Sometimes I find it helpful to put just the tiniest bit of downward pressure on the teat cups. I don't know if that necessarily increases the pressure on the teat or not. I think it does a little bit. It's not enough to hurt it, but I do notice that I get a flow of milk coming out when I do that. It's not a lot of pressure. I'm basically just resting my hand on the inflations or on the hoses just at the base of the inflations. Elsa actually hand milks very easily, and so a lot of times I will kind of just stop it early because sometimes it's easier to hand milk her. My goats that have kids on them, I worry less about completely taking out every last bit of milk, so I just get what I can out of her, whatever's like easiest to get, and if I can feel that she's got milk left in there, it doesn't really matter, her doe will get it. Now, when my strip cup here fills up, I just open up the top of the milker and pour it in. Clover! Okay. Clover is going to give us another learning opportunity. Nope. Let's see if she'll do it. She might be a pain, but that's fine. I'll get to show you what happens. No, she actually did it. Okay. Sometimes what she'll do is she'll try to eat her grain from around the head catch on this side. And I've tried everything to like shove her head where it's supposed to go. Clover weighs 165 pounds. She's very, very strong. I don't have a lot of core strength or strength in general. To me, the easiest thing to do with Clover to get her in the right position is literally just to keep removing her from the stand, having her come up this way, doing what I can to like block the area that she was trying to put her head in before so that she can dive into the correct position herself without having to be forced there. We really don't want the milk stand to be a place where they feel scared or it's like a big struggle every time. We want it to be like a reward center all the time, and she has figured it out, but it took some time for her to figure out this milk stand because she was used to that one. But she got it. Good girl. Oh no. She does have one doe on her right now. I milked about a quart out of Clover's buck side. I had to take her buck off of her yesterday because he was acting too bucky for my liking. Yeah, she gives a lot of milk. A lot of times I'll just have my phone down here scrolling. Because Clover has her doe on her right now, the side where her buck would normally drink is still putting out quite a lot of milk. This one has slowed down a little bit. That's to be expected. Like I mentioned before with Christine, don't worry about that. This pulsating on that side isn't going to hurt them, even if it's not drawing milk out. Mostly because of that pulsating action. It's giving the teat a break and it's not overworking it. So yeah, she's holding milk way up here, as she does. A lot of times when goats have kids on them, they hold back milk, and sometimes they don't give it to you. If you're noticing your goats really holding back milk when they still have babies on them, that can get better as the babies wean and you become their only source of relief in their udder. That can be a problem no matter how you're milking, machine or by hand. And really all of this is a learning curve anyway, for you and for the goat. Goats, they hate anything new, and so it can be a big struggle to do anything new, even if it's milking them on one side when you have milked them on the other side for a long time. They're very, very picky, and it can be quite frustrating. You might think that you're the problem. You're probably not, because goats are incredibly stubborn. It's just about persevering through that, understanding that they're animals and that they don't know. They're prey animals, and so they are kind of primed to be nervous about anything new or different, anything that they don't already have like an expectation for. I've got babies here that really want to be fed their grain. Very soon, we're almost there. I got 2 more does to milk. Clover's one of those goats where the lines tend to just backwash when she's done milking. And I have wondered if it's just like a gravity thing, but I don't think so. They don't have anything falling down into the canister. Tug down just a little. Yeah, she's basically done. We can hand milk from here. Oh, sir. You're okay, I'll get to you. Hang on. Talia is one of my goats that has a meatier udder. She tends to have just more substance to her udder, that doesn't necessarily translate into productive tissue. So it's not necessarily holding milk, it's just, I don't know if it's fat or what it is. So it's not like her daughter Breezy, who deflates into like a limp rag. She will have a little bit left in there, or at least it will feel like it, but it's not actually milk that I know. She is still nursing her twins, so it could be her holding back milk. But yeah, just highlighting the differences between goats. She doesn't normally kick at me, so sometimes when my goats are acting a little bit abnormal, when she wouldn't normally have kicked, it could genuinely be that I am taking a little bit longer to do things today. The camera is down here. I am doing a lot of talking. I don't normally do that. But when my goats are acting just a tiny bit different, I like to kind of give them a good once over to make sure everything is okay. I do have goats that will act like this when they're starting a little bit of a fever or something. Her udder doesn't feel hot. Yeah, so with her, she's not putting a whole ton out for the milk machine, but I can feel it in here, so I'm just gonna work it down. Not as easy to milk as her daughter Breezy, but it's kind of nice to see that her daughter is an improvement on her in that way. She's not an improvement in other ways, but as far as like ease of milking, Breezy is easier, that's for sure. Not a whole bunch in the lines. I'm gonna consider her done. See, her udder still looks quite big. It still feels like there's substance, but I think it's just how her udder feels. Her udder is a little bit meatier. Tizzy! Come on, Tizzy! Tizzy is a beauty as well, who also is a huge improvement on her mother in the milkability department. I actually don't milk Elpis at all. This is her daughter. She milks very easily. She leans more towards her grandma in that regard. Her grandma is Christine, the first goat that we milked. When you take off the inflations, you may see a ring around the teat. I see this especially with does that have a very soft udder texture. This is okay. It's as long as it's not like red or inflamed and it doesn't just look overly irritated. If it did look inflamed and irritated, I would check the pressure gauge and make sure that the pressure isn't too high. But in general, a little ring crease can be there and it's not an indicator of a problem. She's so pretty. So we're back in the shed now, and this is where I clean the machine. Now before I clean it, I have to get the milk out of it. Normally I do take the canister off of the machine and take it in the house and do all the milk straining and things in there. But I figured we'd do it outside today because it is much quieter out here. This lid here has all the hoses and things attached. These do come off and I'll show you that. But I just set that to the side. Oh. One of the things I really like about this canister is it has that handle in the back that's going to help me stabilize the canister for pouring. I do make messes every day, so we'll just go ahead and expect it, okay? Oh shoot, I hope that's big enough. Oh, it is. That was close. 3 1/4 gallons from the girls today. It's what I got yesterday. And I couldn't do that every day by hand. I just couldn't. Now, we like to make a ton of things with our goat's milk. One of my favorite and most fulfilling things that I have made is our own Colby cheese. I make that all the time. We also cream separate a lot of the milk and make our own butter. So we have the use for this much milk. It would just be so hard on my arms to try and milk it by hand. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be able to get a machine like that. Because we bring in so much milk every day, and I don't want to be processing milk every day, I do have a dedicated dairy fridge. I guess it's seasonally dedicated because during the height of dairy season, it's not the height of meat season, but during meat season in the fall time, the refrigerator is really great for all the meat that we harvest here. I gotta take trips. Ugh. Isn't this jar cute? Got at a yard sale. A lot of machines like this are essentially self-cleaning. You can use the machine and the suction in order to draw the cleaning solution and things through the line, and this is no different. It's really great to be able to do that. There's a couple different ways that I have seen other people clean their milk machines, and I've done what I've done for a few years. It's worked really well for me, and one of the first things that I do is actually rinse out this bucket here just with cool water, and then I do fill, this is a 2-gallon pail, I fill it halfway with cool water. So the first step for me for cleaning this machine is a cool water rinse. And the reason that I do this is I have some friends who have a Melasti milker, and they are also scientists, and they helped me realize that if you use hot water immediately on milk, the hot water actually will break down the proteins, like to the point where they kind of fall apart and can tend to stick to the inside of the line over time. That's how you can get some foggy lines and things. And those proteins remaining in the tubes and stuff, that's how you can harbor certain bacteria and things. So I just go the extra step and rinse the milk out with cool water, which will keep those proteins intact and flush them out. Put the lid back on, which is going to complete the seal on the system. Turn it on, except for I'm going to have the inflations all the way open so it's sucking in air, and then it will suck in the water when I dip this down in. This bucket that I have over here, I've had it forever. This is dairy specific soap called Super Soap. I know a few people that clean their milk machines with Dawn. That's probably fine, but I wanted to go the extra mile again just to be sure that things were clean and use a dairy specific soap because it's designed to really handle those proteins and fats that can line the insides of the line and cause issues. Because really with milk machines, it's the lines and the milk solids and things potentially sitting in it, that's what can cause the most problems with milk contamination. So I just put, that might have been a tablespoon and a half of this powdered soap in my bucket. I'm gonna go inside and put a gallon of hot water in here. So soapy water in here now, hot soapy water. I'm just gonna do the same thing. Now after this step, I like to take off the lid and dump the contents of the canister outside. There's actually a lot of bubbles in here, and I don't really want to put the acid rinse through and potentially overflow the system. There are safeguards, at least on this machine. It's not a complete tragedy if you happen to overflow either milk or water into the system. I've seen people clean milk out of their motors. I really like to not mess with it. So at this point, I dump it out just to ensure that I'm not going to overflow.
Am I ruining your video?
Yeah, you're ruining my video. What are you in there?
Trying to put this away.
And the last step that I do is another one that a lot of people don't do every single time, and I do it just out of an abundance of caution to know that everything is clean. This is my acid rinse. You can use vinegar mixed with water for your acid rinse. You go through a lot of vinegar because a lot of vinegars, some of them are 4% acid at this point at the grocery store, but most of the time you'll find a 5% acidic solution, and this phosphoric acid is much more acidic, so we have to use a lot less of it for the same effect. So what the acid wash is going to do is it's going to go through the lines and it's going to stay there. I'm not going to rinse out the acid wash. This is going to create an acidic environment inside the lines that isn't going to allow anything bad to grow in them. So I have a gallon of cool water in here, and I'm just going to put about a tablespoon kind of splash. Might have been a little more, I don't know. A little more is not a problem. I get this locally as well as the super soap. I think you can find similar products like this online. Same thing with the super soap. It's specific for dairy processing equipment. And like I mentioned, this is the 3rd season that I've been doing this. This is only the 2nd bottle of this that I've purchased, and I use it every day when I'm using the machine every day. With this final rinse, I will let the air circulate through to dry up as much as it can, but with the acid rinse, it doesn't matter. If there's liquid left behind, it's acidic enough to not grow anything. Pop the lines off. It's the milk line that goes into the canister, and then I'll pop off the lines that go into the pulsator and hang that up. Now I have this little fish air pump up here. My mentor sent me this. I used to hook this up to my lines to blow air, like a nice puff of air, through the lines to dry them out in between milking. That's fine if you want to do that, but again, because what's left in there is so acidic, I'm really not worried about it not being dried super fast. Another question I get sometimes is, because there's acid in the lines, do you have issues with the milk curdling when you go to milk the next day? And the answer is no. There's not enough of it to curdle the volume of milk that gets put in the canister every day. Then we've got this hose here that comes off. I do take this apart. This gets a little bit humid on the inside, and I'll take this apart, kind of swish it around in the acid rinse down there, and then set this up to dry too. The rest of this happens outside. I still have some milk and stuff on the lid. I'm gonna open up one of these little plugs, take off the seal, and pour the acid rinse over this. I'll do about half on this side. Flip the canister around, flip these around, and do about half on the other side. This coats everything in that acid wash, all sides of the canister. Like that. And then I just set the canister in like that to kind of air dry until next time. Now sometimes if there's milk on the outside of the canister or anything, I will take one of these Swedish dishcloths, which I really like, and buff along the outside, especially up under this lip here. And this cleaning that I did today, it's just the everyday cleaning. It's not the deep cleaning. There does come a time where you'll notice some little like white crusties are kind of remaining where some of the hose components connect to some of the other components like the inflations and things. And when you start to see some like calcifications sticking behind, that's when you know it's time to take the system apart, the hoses apart, not this, but the hoses and things apart, and clean them out really well with hot soapy water and a brush. How often you do that kind of depends on how often you see things kind of sticking back and starting to calcify in the milk line, so it just depends. So a couple more questions that I got about milk machines. If I wanted to store this in my barn, could I do that? A lot of people don't have like a garage or an extra place to store something like this, and you could. And if your barn is quite dusty, or I worry a little bit about humidity, to be honest, with something like this. I don't have experience with that for sure. I would say to at least cover this motor like we did if we were going to go out in the rain, just so dust and things don't settle in there. For my barn personally, I would worry about rodents and things crawling on this and maybe chewing on the lines, because we do have barn cats, but we do also still have some rodents. So I am grateful that I am able to store this inside where it's climate controlled, and the components and things are a lot less likely to be exposed to things like rodents and moisture. So if you can manage that, I would try to manage that. It'll just increase the longevity of the machine. They're not cheap, and you want to be able to take care of them as well as you can. Someone asked the question, would a milking machine make a difference for a small herd of 4 goats? If those 4 goats are difficult to hand milk and they respond well to a machine, it could very well be faster and easier and a lot more enjoyable to machine milk. But I often will milk 4 goats over the winter time, and that is the time that I am hand milking. I will intentionally keep back and breed goats that are easy to hand milk. And so I can get away with hand milking 4 goats, but it is about a gallon to a gallon and a half at most at that time of year. If it gets more than that, I physically can't keep up, but you may be able to. So it could be worth it. It may not be worth it. It's a little bit of a wash as far as time goes. I find that this may take a little bit more time as far as washing them, but I feel like, especially with goats like Breezy, where it just hoovers the milk right out of her, it is faster to milk Breezy with the machine. It's not necessarily faster to milk goats like Elsa with the machine. She does respond a little bit better to hand milking. So it does depend a little bit. Someone asked if washing the milk machine is easy. It's not as easy as washing just a single pail for hand milking, but it's not hard. That wasn't hard. It's really great when the machine can basically use its pump in order to clean itself. It is a little bit tedious to have to take all the parts apart and use the scrubber, but I feel like for what the machine gives me, that hassle is worth it. Darling and Grit asked if you don't have a dishwasher, what sanitizing methods do you use to clean the milk machine? You saw it. I never actually put any of these components in the dishwasher, so you don't need one in order to clean these properly at all. The acid wash definitely is the main thing that keeps everything super, super clean. Hopefully I covered everybody's questions or concerns or things that they were wondering about with machine milking. If you have more questions, put them down below, or if you have any experiences with other milk machines, put those experiences down below. It doesn't matter if your experience is different than the experience that I had with them. If you had a different experience, let people know, because it's really important when you are researching something like this, especially when you're trying to drop lots of money on an expensive machine. You want to be able to get a bunch of different opinions, see what other people thought, see what they liked, what they didn't like, and then you can form your own opinion with the compilation of different opinions. Speaking of that, I have friends that have a Melasti milker. I mentioned them. And I have another friend who uses a simple pulse machine. Both machines have a pulsator and both machines look really awesome. If you'd like to see both of those machines in action, I'll put both of the videos right here. I'll see you guys again soon.